It all started like any other day. I had no idea that the world I knew, the life I worked so hard to build, was about to come crashing down. Sarah and I, we were what everyone would call a perfect couple on the surface. We had a beautiful apartment in the city, I had a solid career, and well, she was everything you could want in a wife: beautiful, loving, caring. We had our routines, our rituals. I'd work late at the office, she'd take care of things at home, and we would catch up at night, maybe over a glass of wine or a quiet dinner. But somewhere along the way, I stopped noticing her. I became consumed with work, with climbing higher, with making sure everything outside of our home was perfect. I didn't know it, but I was losing her. It wasn't sudden. At first, she would just seem a little distant, distracted, but I thought it was just the stress of life. The kind of thing that comes with age, right? I didn't think much of it. I just assumed everything would be fine, like it always had been. And then there was Ryan, the driver. I had no reason to suspect anything. He was just our chauffeur, right? Just a guy who drove us from place to place. Nothing more than a job for him. At least that's what I told myself. But if I'm being honest, I always found him different. He had that way about him. He wasn't like the others. Polite, sure, but with an edge. I noticed Sarah's eyes linger on him more than they should. I didn't think much of it. Maybe it was just the way he was. But as time went on, I began to see something more. A smile that was a little too knowing. A touch of her hand as she got into the car. Casual, friendly, but I could see it. The little things we men notice when we're too late. That night, it happened. I had to stay late at the office. I hated it, but sometimes work comes first. I told Sarah I'd be home by midnight. She seemed fine. Happy even. She kissed me goodbye as usual, nothing different, nothing out of the ordinary. Or so I thought. When I finally got home, I noticed the lights were still on. Sarah was sitting in the living room, but something was off. There was this strange energy in the air, a heaviness that I couldn't place. At first, I thought it was just me being tired. But no, something was different. It wasn't until I walked past her phone on the counter that I saw it. A message from Ryan. "I'll see you tomorrow, Sarah," it read. No big deal, right? Just a simple message. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it. And then I looked closer at the phone. Another message followed. "I'll be waiting for you, if you want to feel alive again." My blood ran cold. I don't know why I didn't confront her then. Maybe it was denial, maybe it was because I didn't want to believe it. But I walked into the living room, sat down across from her, and tried to act normal. "How was your day?" I asked. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. It was good. Busy, but I could feel it. The way she kept looking away, the way she was fidgeting with her fingers. She wasn't telling me something. I could see it in her face. She was hiding something. And that's when I asked the question that changed everything. "Sarah, what's going on with you and Ryan?" I didn't even know how the words came out. They just slipped from my mouth, unbidden, as if they had been waiting there for a long time. I watched her face pale, her eyes wide in shock, and then she tried to play it off, like it was nothing. But I knew then. I wasn't the only one she was thinking about. The silence that followed was suffocating. She didn't say a word for a long time. Her eyes avoided mine, and I could hear her breath catch. Finally, she spoke, but the words that came out of her mouth weren't what I expected. "I kissed him," she said. The simple confession hit me harder than any blow could. Felt like the world shifted under my feet. Kissing? I could handle that, right? It was just a kiss. But then she kept talking, as though it was nothing. As though she hadn't just shattered everything I thought I knew. It was more than a kiss, she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. We did everything. Everything couples do. And he made me feel alive again. Something you stopped doing a long time ago. My heart broke. I don't think I've ever felt more betrayed in my life. I wanted to shout, to scream, to throw something. Anything to make it all stop. But I didn't. Instead, I just sat there, staring at her, feeling the emptiness creep into my chest. And then she said something that I will never forget. "I didn't mean to hurt you, but I needed something more. Something real." Something real? Was she saying that our marriage wasn't real? That everything I had worked for, Everything I thought we had wasn't enough? I stood up, my legs trembling. My mind was racing. My heart was pounding. I had to get out of there. I had to get away from her. I needed space to think. But as I walked towards the door, I heard her voice again. Please, Jason, don't leave me. But it was too late. The damage was done. And my world, the life I thought I had, would never be the same. I didn't know how long I stood there, frozen by the door, but it felt like hours. Her words echoed in my mind. I needed something more. Something real. More than what? More than me? The wife I thought I knew was gone. The woman I had trusted with everything had thrown our life away for. For what? The excitement of a stranger? The touch of a man who was supposed to be invisible in the background of our perfect world. I should have left then, walked out, but I couldn't. Instead, I stood there, trembling, as Sarah sat quietly on the couch, eyes fixed on the floor, unable to meet my gaze. She had no idea what I was feeling. I wanted to be angry. Hell, I was furious. But it wasn't just anger I felt. It was the crushing weight of betrayal. The realization that everything I'd worked for, my career, our home, our future together, meant nothing to her. She did everything with him. Everything that couples do. That phrase haunted me. I could barely look at her without feeling nauseous. How long? I asked, my voice barely audible. I didn't want to hear the answer, but I had to know. Was this a one-time mistake, or was this a full-blown affair? She looked up at me, her eyes full of guilt and shame. She opened her mouth, but no words came out for a long moment. Finally, she whispered, a few months. Months. That's how long this had been going on behind my back. While I was working late, while I thought everything was fine, she had been with him, touching him, kissing him, giving herself to him in ways she had once only shared with me. I could feel my world slipping away. I didn't know if I was angry at her or at myself. How had I not seen it coming? How had I missed all the signs? Or was it simply that I didn't want to see? Maybe I had been so consumed by my own world that I turned a blind eye to the distance between us. The silence between us was unbearable. She sat there, her hands twisting nervously in her lap, while I stood frozen, fighting the urge to scream, to destroy everything around me. I wanted to hurt her like she had hurt me, but I knew I couldn't. Did you love him? The question slipped from my mouth before I could stop it. I had to know. Was this just a fling, a momentary lapse in judgment, or had I been replaced in her heart? Her face tightened. I don't know. I don't know what to feel anymore, she replied, her voice trembling. That was it. She didn't know. Not about him. Not about me. She didn't know what we had. She didn't even know who she was anymore. I turned away. I couldn't look at her anymore. My chest was heavy, and I couldn't breathe. I needed space. I needed to think. But before I reached the door, she called out to me. Jason, please. Don't leave. I didn't answer. I walked out of the apartment, not sure where I was going, only knowing that I couldn't stay in that house, in that life with her anymore. The drive. I got into my car and drove. I didn't care where I went, as long as it was far away from her. The streets blurred around me as I sped through the night, my mind spinning with 1,000 thoughts, each one worse than the last. How could she do this? What does she even see in him? Is this the end of us? I didn't know how long I drove, but eventually, I found myself in a dark parking lot, alone with my thoughts. The weight of what had happened settled in, suffocating me. I couldn't outrun it. I had to face it even if I wasn't ready. I needed to do something. I couldn't just let it go. I couldn't just walk away from this like I hadn't been destroyed by it. But what was I supposed to do now? Then it hit me. I needed to confront him. Ryan. The man who had taken what was mine. The man who had made her feel alive again. I had to know everything. I had to see him. I had to understand what had driven her to this. Because as much as I hated to admit it, I felt a strange need to know. What made him so irresistible? What did he offer her that I couldn't? I grabbed my phone and dialed the number Sarah had left open on her contact list. Ryan's number. My hand was shaking as I pressed call. Hello. His voice came through, calm, almost too calm. Ryan, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, it's Jason. I need to talk to you. I didn't know what I expected him to say. Maybe I thought he would apologize. Maybe I thought he would try to defend himself. But instead, there was a long pause. And then he spoke. I figured this was coming. His tone was strangely indifferent, as though he had known all along that this moment would come. I could feel the coldness in his words, the audacity of it, the nerve of this man who had stolen my wife. I'm coming to see you, I said. I need to talk. Face to face. I hung up before he could respond. The urge to do something, anything, was overwhelming. I was no longer the man who had been betrayed. I was the man who was going to make this right, whatever that meant. I wasn't sure what I was going to do, but I knew one thing for sure. Ryan was going to pay. I drove to the address that Ryan had given me in the past. A nondescript part of town, where the streets seemed quieter, darker. Felt like the calm before a storm. My mind was a mess of thoughts. What was I going to do? I wasn't sure. All I knew was that I couldn't just walk away from this. Not from the man who had stolen my wife's heart, or at least, taken her in a way I never could anymore. I parked my car a few blocks away and walked the rest of the distance. I wasn't sure why I didn't drive up directly. Maybe it was instinct, maybe it was the part of me that wanted to feel in control of the situation, even though I knew I was walking into the lion's den. The building was a small, run-down apartment complex. Nothing fancy, just plain concrete and rusted railings. Ryan's place. I couldn't believe I was standing here, coming face to face with the man who had been so casually playing with the life I'd worked so hard to build. I rang the buzzer. The sound of the intercom crackled. Yeah. His voice was low, calm, like he was expecting me. I didn't waste time. It's Jason. Open up. My voice was sharper than I intended, but I couldn't help it. The anger, the frustration, it was all bubbling up inside me, threatening to break free. A long pause followed, and then the buzz of the door unlocking echoed through the building. I pushed open the door, the heavy weight of it making me feel like I was stepping into some dark, unknown world. Ryan was standing at the top of the stairs, leaning against the railing with that same infuriatingly calm expression on his face. He didn't look shocked to see me, not even a little. It was as if he had been waiting for this moment to come, waiting for the man he'd destroyed to show up. You wanted to see me, Ryan said, his voice smooth. He didn't move an inch, his eyes locking onto mine as I made my way up the stairs. He didn't seem worried. Hell, he didn't even seem guilty. I stopped a few steps away from him, the tension between us almost palpable. For a moment, I just stood there, trying to control the flood of emotions crashing through me. Anger, betrayal, hatred. But there was something else too. Something that made my hands shake and my stomach twist. A sense of helplessness. You think you can just walk into my life and take my wife? I spat the words at him, the venom in my voice making it clear how much he had hurt me. How long did you think you could keep this going, Ryan? How long before I'd find out? He didn't flinch. He didn't even seem fazed by my anger. Instead, he pushed himself off the railing and took a step forward, his eyes never leaving mine. There was a strange, almost mocking grin on his face. How long, he repeated, as though the question amused him. As long as it took for her to find what she was looking for. The words cut deep. I wanted to lash out, to do something, anything. But instead, I stood frozen, my chest tight with the weight of his indifference. She needed more than you could give her, Ryan continued. She needed excitement, passion, someone who saw her, really saw her. Not just the role she played in your little perfect life. It was like a slap in the face. You think this is just about excitement? I managed to say, my voice shaking. This is my marriage we're talking about. He leaned in slightly, his voice lowering as he stepped closer to me. I don't think you get it, man. There was a dangerous edge in his tone now, a slight smirk still playing at the corner of his lips. It's not about her needing more from you. It's about the fact that you stopped seeing her at all. His words stung. He was right in a way I didn't want to admit. I had been so caught up in my career, so blind to her needs, that I didn't notice she was slipping away. But that didn't give him the right to take her. I could feel the fury building inside me now. You think you've won? You think you've stolen something from me? I said through gritted teeth. You're wrong. You haven't won anything. Ryan's grin widened, and he leaned back against the wall, folding his arms. There was something almost mocking in the way he looked at me. He knew the power he held over me now. If you really believe that, Jason, you're fooling yourself. My blood boiled. You don't know what I'm capable of. I warned him, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. I wanted to hit him, but something inside me held me back. I didn't want to lose control. Not yet. Ryan held my gaze for a long moment. Then, in the same calm, measured voice, he said, "You're right. I don't know what you're capable of. But I do know this. You'll never be able to forget what she did with me. No matter what happens now, she's mine, Jason. She'll always be mine." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I didn't want to believe it, but a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that maybe he was right. But I wasn't going to let him win. I didn't care how confident he was. I didn't care how calm he seemed. I was going to make sure he understood the price of crossing me, of taking something so precious from me. "This isn't over," I said, my voice low and filled with resolve. "You'll regret this, Ryan. I promise you, you'll regret this." I turned and walked out, leaving him standing there in his quiet little world. I didn't know what I was going to do next, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let him get away with it. Not now, not ever. I didn't sleep that night. It felt like my mind was a whirlwind, spinning with 1,000 thoughts I couldn't control. I kept replaying the words Ryan had said to me over and over again. "She's mine, Jason." I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to accept that this man, this stranger, had wormed his way into my wife's life, her heart, in ways I hadn't. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized how deeply I had failed her. I couldn't focus. I tried to work, tried to throw myself into my usual routine. But every time I looked at the clock, I thought about her, about what she had done, about how she had betrayed me with someone else. The image of Ryan's smug face haunted me. So calm, so certain. He had won. But I wasn't going to let him win. Not like this. Not after everything I had built. Everything I had sacrificed. I was going to make him feel the same pain I did. The next day, I drove to the apartment again. I wasn't sure what I was going to do when I got there, but I had to confront the situation. Confront her. When I walked through the door, Sarah was sitting at the kitchen table, looking up at me with a face full of guilt and anxiety. She didn't even try to pretend everything was normal. "You went to see him," she said, her voice soft but tinged with fear. Yes, I did. I didn't care about the guilt in her voice. I was past that. The trust between us was gone. Everything had changed the moment she let him into our lives, into her body, her heart. I didn't want to look at her. Not now. Not after everything she had done. She had betrayed me, and no matter how many apologies she made, I couldn't forget what had happened, what he had taken from me. "Sarah, why?" I asked, my voice finally breaking. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just hollow. The pain had drained all the rage from me. "Why did you let this happen?" She looked down, her hands trembling in her lap. "I didn't mean for it to happen, Jason. I swear I didn't. It was just a moment of weakness. I felt invisible, lost. You were so distant, so wrapped up in your work. I needed someone who saw me, who listened to me. Ryan, he was different. He made me feel alive again. Alive." The word hit me like a ton of bricks. The same word Ryan had used when he spoke about her. "And I didn't see you?" I said, my voice almost a whisper. "All this time, I didn't see you?" She shook her head, her eyes wet with tears. "I tried, Jason. I really did. I loved you, but I needed more. I needed to feel like I mattered. I couldn't take it anymore. The woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew, was gone. All that was left was the shattered version of her who had betrayed me." I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I don't know if I can do this anymore, Sarah." I turned and walked out of the room before she could respond, before the tears she was about to cry could break me. I couldn't be her rock anymore. Not when she had destroyed everything we had. I spent the next few days in a blur. Sarah pleaded with me to come back, to give us another chance. But every time I looked at her, I saw him. Every time she touched me, I felt the weight of her betrayal. It was suffocating. I couldn't stand being around her. Not yet. Not until I figured out how to fix this. Or if I even wanted to fix it. But Ryan, he wasn't just going to get away with it. I wasn't going to let him. Not after what he had done. Not after what he had taken from me. I began to plot. I knew I had to hurt him just like he had hurt me. But this time I would do it on my terms. I couldn't go to the police. There was no evidence. No way to pin anything on him. But I didn't need to. I had a plan. I would take away everything he valued. He thought he could just waltz into my life, into my marriage, and ruin everything without consequence. He had another thing coming. The first step was easy. I knew where Ryan liked to hang out. His favorite bars. The places he went to unwind after a long day. I didn't have to dig far to find out. After all, I had been his client before. I knew the ins and outs of his life more than I cared to admit. I watched him from a distance, waiting. He didn't even notice me. And then I did something I would regret. I walked up to him. I didn't care what happened next. I was so consumed by the anger and betrayal that I didn't think. All I wanted was to make him feel as small as he had made me feel. To see the same fear in his eyes that I had seen in Sarah's when she confessed everything to me. You think you can just walk away from this? I said to him, my voice sharp and cold. You don't get to take what's mine and think there are no consequences. Ryan looked up at me, his smirk gone, his eyes narrowing. He knew I meant business. But he didn't say a word. Instead, he stood up and walked away, not bothering to look back. I stood there, my fists clenched, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel like I had won. What was I really doing? Destroying my life further. Pushing away the only woman I had ever loved? But it was too late to turn back now. I couldn't sleep anymore. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ryan's face. His smug grin. The way he had looked at me, almost pitying me, like I was a fool who deserved what had happened. I had told myself that I was just trying to make things right, that I needed to take back control. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I wasn't just punishing him. I was punishing myself. This wasn't about getting her back. It was about making sure I didn't look weak. The more I hurt him, the more I hurt myself. Every confrontation, every moment of revenge made me feel emptier. Like I was filling a bottomless pit with anger and regret. What was the point? Was I trying to get Sarah back? Or was I trying to punish her? Was I trying to hurt Ryan so badly that he would feel as small as I felt? The truth was, I didn't even know anymore. I wasn't the same man who had walked into that apartment. I had changed. Something inside me had snapped when I saw the messages, when I found out everything she had done behind my back. I wasn't the man who loved his wife and trusted her. I wasn't the man who believed in loyalty. But Sarah, she still wanted me. She still called, still texted, still begged for my forgiveness. But each time I saw her face, I only saw the betrayal. It was as if her eyes had changed. I couldn't look at her without remembering what she had done, what she had given to him. One night she came to see me. I didn't expect her. She just showed up at my door, looking desperate, her eyes red from crying. She stood there for a long time before I even spoke. Jason, she whispered, stepping closer. Please, please, let's fix this. I couldn't help but feel a small flicker of something. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe in us. But could I? Could I ever look at her the same way again? Fix this, I repeated, my voice filled with disbelief. How do you fix this, Sarah? How do you fix what you did? How do you fix something that can never be undone? She took a shaky breath, her hands trembling. I know I hurt you. I know I made a terrible mistake. But I love you, Jason. I made a mistake, a huge one. But I want to fix it. I want to fight for us. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to more than anything. But the truth was, I didn't know if I could ever forgive her. Not after everything. Not after what Ryan had taken from me. I don't know if I can, Sarah, I said, my voice low. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. She stepped forward, her voice breaking. Please, Jason. You have to. We can start over. We can make this work. But the words didn't make sense. How could we make it work when everything had been shattered? I couldn't pretend like things were the same. I couldn't go back to what we had before. Not when there was a shadow between us that would never disappear. And then, in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't just angry at her. I wasn't just angry at Ryan. I was angry at myself. Because the truth was, I had been blind. I had been so absorbed in my own life that I had ignored the signs, ignored the growing distance between us. I had taken her for granted. And now I was paying the price. The night was quiet when she left. She didn't cry anymore. She just nodded silently and walked out the door. And in that silence, I felt it, the weight of everything that had happened. The loss, the heartbreak, the anger, but also the guilt. I didn't know what I wanted anymore. Did I want her back? Did I want to fix this, as she said? Or did I want to burn everything down and walk away? I wasn't sure. All I knew was that I was lost. I spent the next few days in a fog. I couldn't think straight. Every time I tried to focus on work, on something that mattered, my mind drifted back to her, to Ryan, to the destruction of everything that had once been my world. Then something happened. I got a message. A text. From Ryan. I know what you're trying to do, it read. You can't fix this. You can't undo what's already been done. She's mine now, Jason. And you'll never get her back. The words hit me like a punch in the stomach. He wasn't just talking about her anymore. He was talking about everything I had ever valued. Everything I had ever worked for. I had to do something. I wasn't going to let him walk away with everything. I wasn't going to let him have her, have us, like this. But deep down, I knew it was too late. The finality of the situation sank in. This was no longer about revenge. This was no longer about getting her back. It was about survival. It was about picking up the pieces of the life that had been shattered and trying to move forward, whether I could forgive her or not. The wild ride was over. It had been a week since I last saw her. A week since Sarah walked out of our apartment, her face streaked with tears, her words of pleading ringing in my ears. She wanted to make it right. She wanted to fight for us. But I wasn't sure I could. The damage was done. I had tried to push her away, tried to shut her out, but the truth was, I couldn't stop thinking about her. Could I forgive her? Could I ever trust her again? The questions swirled in my head, but every time I looked at her, I remembered him, Ryan, the man who had taken her from me, who had stolen what was mine. But revenge had consumed me. In the days after our confrontation, I had thrown myself into trying to destroy him. I didn't care about the cost anymore. It was as if his presence in my life had become a cancer, and I needed to rip it out by any means necessary. I had gone too far. The pranks, the sabotage, the manipulation, all of it, it didn't bring me peace. It didn't make me feel better. I felt like a stranger in my own life. I didn't recognize the person I had become. The man who had walked into that apartment a few weeks ago was gone. Now I was someone else. A man filled with rage, with bitterness. Someone who had been consumed by the need for revenge and had forgotten what it was like to love, to trust. And then I got a call. It was Sarah. Jason, her voice was soft, trembling. I know I've ruined everything, but please let me talk to you. Just one last time. I didn't know what to do. My first instinct was to hang up, to tell her it was over. But there was something in her voice, a desperation, a brokenness, that made me pause. Where are you? I finally asked. Please, Jason. I'm at the park. Can we just talk? Just for a minute. I hesitated, but then I found myself agreeing. It was like I had no control over my own actions anymore. I needed answers, even if I wasn't sure what I was looking for. I needed closure. When I saw her, she looked different. Gone was the confident, beautiful woman I had once known. In her place was someone shattered. Her eyes were red from crying, her face pale and weary. She looked like a woman who had lost everything, and maybe she had. She stood up when she saw me, her hands trembling as she reached out. But I didn't take her hand. Couldn't. Jason, she whispered, her voice broken. I'm sorry. I know I hurt you. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I'm begging you. Please, don't let this be the end of us. I stared at her, feeling a wave of conflicting emotions crashing over me. I wanted to scream at her, tell her to leave, tell her how much she had destroyed me. But instead, I stood there, silent. I couldn't speak. I didn't know what to say. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said finally, my voice low. I don't know if I can ever forget what you did. But she stepped closer, her eyes pleading. Please, Jason. I'll do anything. I love you. I've made the biggest mistake of my life, but I can't lose you. I need you. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to fall into her arms and tell her everything was going to be okay. But the reality was, things were broken. Irrevocably broken. I don't know if I can trust you again, Sarah. The words tasted like acid in my mouth. But they were the truth. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I know I've lost your trust. But I'm willing to do whatever it takes to fix this. Please, Jason, don't give up on us. For a long moment I didn't say anything. My mind raced with the thousand things I should be feeling. Anger, hurt, betrayal. But strangely, beneath it all, there was a faint glimmer of something else. Something I didn't want to acknowledge. I still loved her. But could love fix this? Could it heal the wounds that had been torn open? Could we go back to what we had before Ryan, before the lies? I don't know if we can go back, Sarah. The words hung in the air between us like a final sentence. I don't know if I can ever be the man I was before. She nodded again, as if she already knew the answer. I understand. Her voice was quiet now, resigned. But maybe we can start over. Maybe we can build something new, something real, something stronger. Together. I stood there, torn. I wasn't sure if I was ready to forgive her. I wasn't sure if I was ready to let go of the anger, the hurt, the betrayal. But maybe, just maybe, this was the first step toward healing. Toward something new. A new beginning. I don't know, Sarah, I said softly. But maybe, just maybe, we can try. And with that, I walked away. It's been months now. Months since Sarah and I last saw each other in that park, where we exchanged the final words that hung heavy between us. The questions I had about forgiveness, about trust, still lingered, but time, like it always does, pushed us forward. The truth is, we both knew that what we had wasn't going to return to what it once was. The lies, the infidelity, the betrayal, those wounds had cut too deep. But time doesn't stop for broken hearts, and neither did I. I couldn't keep living in the past. For a while I tried. I held on to the idea that maybe we could pick up the pieces, rebuild something, find a way back. But in the end, I realized it wasn't about fixing things. It was about moving forward. About learning to live with the consequences of the choices we'd made. And Sarah, she had to face her own demons. We didn't see each other for a long time after that night. I didn't hear from her. No texts, no calls. She was going through her own journey, one of reflection and regret. I knew she had her own fight to wage against the guilt of what she had done. I didn't want to make it harder for her, but I couldn't help but wonder if she would ever truly understand the damage she'd caused. I think we both knew it was over. There was no grand confrontation, no fiery arguments or dramatic goodbyes. In some ways, that made it even harder. The quiet realization that we were no longer who we used to be. We were different people now, shaped by the choices we made, by the pain we had caused each other. And then one day she called. It was a surprise. I had almost forgotten what her voice sounded like. Jason, she said softly. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. For everything. It wasn't a plea for us to get back together. It wasn't an attempt to heal old wounds. It was just a simple acknowledgement of what had happened. And in that moment, I realized something. I had forgiven her. Not in the way that heals everything. Not in the way that erases the past, but in the way that allows you to move forward, to let go of the anger, the bitterness, the need for retribution. I had forgiven her because I realized holding on to it was only hurting me. I had to let go. I know, I said, my voice steady. I know, Sarah. And I'm sorry too. For everything. We talked for a while. exchanging words we both needed to say. But neither of us said what was really on our minds. Maybe we both knew that some things were better left unsaid. After that call, we never spoke again. We had both moved on in our own ways. Sarah had found her path, one where she had to come to terms with her own mistakes. She had learned a lot about herself, about what truly mattered. And me? I had started over too. I had learned that revenge, no matter how justified it feels, only drags you deeper into the darkness. I had learned that trust isn't something you can demand. It's something you have to earn. And sometimes, even when you want to, you can't turn back the clock. I walked away, and in doing so, I found peace. I still think about Sarah from time to time. I wonder how she's doing, what she's learned, whether she ever truly understood the depth of what she'd done to me. But those thoughts are quiet now, not filled with bitterness or regret. Life moves on. I'm not the same person I was when this all started. None of us are. We carry the scars with us, but we don't let them define us. And as for Ryan, he's still out there somewhere. But he no longer occupies space in my mind. I let him go too. I've learned the hard way that sometimes the only way to find peace is to let go of the past and move forward. I don't know if Sarah and I will ever talk again. Maybe one day we'll cross paths, and maybe we'll be different people then. Or maybe not. But for now, I'm moving forward. And that's enough. We've just come to the end of a roller coaster of emotions. Betrayal, revenge, forgiveness. This story had it all. From the shocking moments of infidelity to the intense emotional confrontations, we watched Jason navigate a whirlwind that none of us would want to experience. The question is, what would you have done in his place? Was revenge truly sweet, or did it only leave him feeling emptier? Did Sarah deserve a second chance, or was it simply too late to rebuild trust? And Ryan, did he take something from Jason, or was he just a catalyst in a broken marriage? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think Jason made the right choice in forgiving Sarah? Or should he have walked away for good? What part of the story had the most emotional impact on you? Could you see yourself in any of the characters? How would you have handled this situation? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Your opinions matter, and we'd love to hear your perspective on the emotional journey Jason and Sarah went through. Stay tuned for more unheard stories. This story may have ended, but the journey doesn't stop here. If you want more thrilling, shocking, and raw stories that dive deep into the lives of people facing their darkest moments, make sure to hit follow and subscribe to our channel. We'll bring you more gripping tales, stories of betrayal, revenge, love, and everything in between. Subscribe now. Backhand index pointing right follow for the next chapter in your favorite stories. The story may be over, but the conversation doesn't have to end. Share this story with friends who love intense drama and deep emotional conflicts. Let's keep the conversation going.